Twin Circle Headlines. Twin Circle Headline is a spontaneous discussion of the major issues of the day and the people who make them. I'm your moderator, Tom Davis. The question, or perhaps more properly, the debate over whether or not we ought to have sex education programs in the schools of America, public and private, rages on. The subject has become front-page headlines in most publications in this country. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that the controversy is as bitter and emotional as any that ever rocked the nation's schools, and they report that sex education in America is in trouble. In an effort to help our audience gain a better understanding as to the pros and cons of this issue, we have invited as our guest this week Dr. James Lieberman. Dr. Lieberman is a diplomate in psychiatry of the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology, now with the National Institute of Mental Health, and an assistant professor of psychiatry at Howard University Medical School. He is a former member of the board of directors of SIECUS, the Sex Education Information Council of the United States, and a proponent of sex education programs in our schools. Here to welcome our guest is Father Daniel Lyons, author and journalist and our Twin Circle Headline editor. Father?
Dr. Lieberman, how do you account for the great furor in this whole subject of sex education?
I wish I could say why it's erupted now so loudly. I think it's been an issue for a long time, but perhaps it's an idea whose time has come. In the past couple of years, we've seen with the development of the Sex Information Education Council and many, many requests from schools and communities around the country for help, a wave of resistance also, so that the conflict is now full-blown. I think it's a healthy conflict, basically.
Well, what I think concerns many people is when people like Dr. Calderon, the leader in this field, will come out and write off all the Ten Commandments. Right away she leaves out the Catholics, the Protestants, and the Jews. She says, I don't believe in the old thou shalt not. So she's condoning adultery, she's condoning immorality, and so on, but she just has a different standard. But I don't think she should impose those standards on the children of parents who do condemn adultery and so on.
Well, I think that's a misstatement of Mary Calderon's position. I think Dr. Calderon talks about the need for dealing with the relativism and the shifting value positions and the questioning and the commercialism of sex and what she considers the hypocrisy of the environment that children are raised in. But I don't think she wants to write off the Ten Commandments.
Well, Doctor, she said exactly this. I don't believe in the old thou shalt not anymore. Now, there's no way that you can get around that statement. She does not believe in that adultery is wrong. She doesn't believe in thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife and so on. She says, I don't believe in it. And Doctor, it's not a misstatement. I'm saying this is exactly a quotation, in quotation marks. There's no way that you can say she doesn't mean what she said.
She's willing to dispense with or discard the old thou shalt not. Well, as a psychiatrist interested in child psychology and behavior, I would say that thou shalt nots tend not to be very effective. And in that sense, while I would like to retain the moral precepts of the past, I'd like to make them more poignant, more relevant, and more understandable. I think there's a reason why there are certain moral precepts, and I think that the thou shalt not approach, the scare approach, the don't do it or you'll get the D, or just like, brush your teeth or they'll fall out. These kinds of approaches simply don't work. The kids turn their backs on the adult generation, and again, I can't speak for Dr. Calderon, but it's my impression that she's looking for a way to bridge the generation gap, not to throw out the moral precepts. At least that's my position.
Well, don't you feel that, first of all, the vast majority of adults, you're familiar with adult society, the vast majority of married people do not practice adultery. These people do not want their children to practice immorality. It seems to me an invasion of the rights of an individual child, an invasion of the parents' rights. If someone like Dr. Calderon goes on and says, well, it's perfectly all right.
Well, this has been going on for a long time. You only have to look on the drugstore bookshelves to find out advocacy of many things we wouldn't want our kids to do, including murder and mayhem, and even on television. That is, it may not be so stated, but I believe the message gets across. As I say, I don't think Mary Calderon condones or advocates adultery. I certainly don't. We know it does exist, however, in the society, and I think we have to find a way to talk to kids about some of these issues. And I don't think it's sufficient to say don't do it. I think we have to say to kids, well, look, I read about it in this magazine or this newspaper or this book, and what do you have to say about it? And why not adultery? Why not masturbation? Why not premarital sex? I think we have to deal with these questions. Now, at home, the parents have every opportunity to make their views clear, both through words and through example, and they should. I don't think that they can possibly be expert enough to give a good description of the function of the ovary and the testicle, to talk about the menstrual cycle, to talk about demography and population change, to talk about what is abortion, what are nocturnal emissions, and so on. That is, they may be able to. Some parents will be able to, but knowledge in the sexual area changes also, and this is why I feel that the school has to supplement home sex education. It should not supplant home values, but if the home values are reasonably well stated and reasonably well lived, I can't imagine that a school is going to overturn them.
Doctor, do you believe, as a proponent of sex education, the subjects that you've just mentioned, masturbation, premarital sex, and so forth, require on the part of a teacher in the process of instructing and training moral judgment?
There's no escaping that these are morally loaded areas, and in the sense that the teacher's judgment is involved, I would say that his or her judgment has to be one which recognizes the social mores of this society, and she can communicate to kids what these are. She also, or he, has to recognize that there are some violations of mores, and what does this mean? In other words, what brings a person to do what is wrong according to the society? And that finally, the teacher has to recognize that we're in a pluralistic society, and that children from different homes, different backgrounds, different religions will have different viewpoints on certain matters, including masturbation, birth control, and abortion. So the teachers...
You're beginning to deal not only with moral ethical questions, but directly with religious questions, because there are, as you know, strong feelings and regulations and rules within religious communities in this country on these subjects. And
absolutely.
I think one of the problems that comes up here is the question of how is a teacher going to handle these things if, in fact, we're not going to establish moral standards in our schools? How can we then deal with these subjects without permeating the atmosphere of the classroom with one's personal views?
Well, it takes a good teacher, but the problem is no greater, in my estimation, than the problem of dealing with a vegetarian child in a class or a Christian Science child in a class when it comes to talking about meat as a food, or when it comes to talking about going to the doctor. One doesn't want to violate the tenets of the faith of a Christian Scientist in that instance. So when it comes to discussing birth control in a class and wanting to pay respect to not only Catholics but possibly Orthodox Jews who also have reservations about contraception, one simply has to say there are religious viewpoints that feel all artificial contraception is wrong. And in this way, in just saying this, and in not saying this is that we have to impose one viewpoint over another, but that all seriously held viewpoints of different groups have to be respected, the teacher is imparting an even more important lesson, which is tolerance.
A young man from Tempe, Arizona, his name is Randy McCarthy, writes in the letters to the editor column of the Look magazine. As you know, they recently carried a historian. I don't mean to make a generalization from one example, but I think it's relevant. He says, I'm 16 years old and out of a class that had education in sex. And I remind you that I know all of these people very well. 23 are constant smokers, 2 are on drugs, 11 girls are now considered teenage whores, and all but a few of the boys would be fathers were it not for the progressive lessons they had on using contraceptives. Now, again, this is one individual. But if our society, a democratic society, is based on protecting everybody, don't we need to protect him?
Yes, that's, I certainly think that youngsters deserve protection. I think that this includes not prematurely bringing in issues such as we've talked about: masturbation, contraception, abortion, premarital sex, adultery, and so on. These are topics. Incest, rape, sex is loaded with issues which are too difficult for many adults to cope with. Well, I don't think we should talk about these things in kindergarten or nursery school or what have you. I know Dr. Calderon's been charged with saying that we should. I think that that's a misunderstanding.
Well, there are, as you know, there have been and are today programs that exist K through 12,
yes,
through 12, in sex education. Doctor, we have to take a break for just this brief message. We will come back and continue. Our guest this week on Twin Circle Headline is Dr. Lieberman, psychiatrist. Our subject, sex education in the schools. Dr. Lieberman, when the early advocates of sex education programs began, perhaps they made a tactical error when, for example, Francis Fain said, don't talk this over with teachers and faculty, because if you do that, you're opening the matter to discussion or putting it to a vote that would endanger the work. Don't call for a democratic meeting of parents and let them discuss whether they want it. Dr. Kirkendall of SIECUS sneaked the program into the school system. Don't you think these were bad tactical mistakes?
Well, I certainly don't agree with that approach. I can't certify to the positions of these people, but I think, as I said before, that the controversy is basically a healthy one. It has engendered a tremendous amount of interest by parents in their schools, and also among teachers and principals as to who is going to take on the responsibility of teaching in this area, which is a highly charged area. I think that the discussion that's emerged is by and large beneficial. I think there are some people who have other axes to grind about school systems in general. My own feeling is one of confidence in teachers and principals and the system and in parents to reach a conclusion which is consonant with the needs of children. And I, of course, believe that this will be some form of sex education program.
Doctor, you have said that not all parents are competent, and you gave the example of teaching about the menstrual cycle. The old system that I was familiar with is where a doctor would be brought in to lecture. He would lecture to the girls separately and the boys separately. For one thing, it seems to me a great invasion of privacy to lecture to a mixed class of the young people about the menstrual cycle. I don't think this is a fit subject to have in a mixed audience. But what percentage of teachers are competent to lecture about the menstrual cycle?
Well, I would say probably maybe 5%, 10%. But not every teacher has to do it. There has to be some teacher selection, just as we don't have every teacher teaching civics or geometry. so that some competence has to be demonstrated.
Yes, well, you, for example, are a very competent lecturer on these subjects. You specialize. You've had unlimited education 4 years after your MD and so on. But when we say, well, we're going to give 100 hours a year to everybody from kindergarten to through high school, obviously we're going to have those 95% of teachers teaching who are not any more competent than parents. And in fact, a lot of the teachers